The Center for Innovation and Technology is offering you a golden opportunity to speak directly to your market at an affordable price. We also offer media training workshops, live streaming, documentary production, and events management. Get in touch with us today on the following numbers: +263 867 711 0290 or 0718 100 235. Don't forget to subscribe to our social media platforms. Like our Facebook page, Center for Innovation and Technology. Follow us on Twitter @SiteZW. And you can also check out our website, www.site.org.zw.
I want to give you some background to understand the problems that Ndebele walked into when he walked into the Ministry of Finance on August the 1st, 2018. The problems started at the end of the GNU. The GNU collapsed with the elections in 2013, and the Ndebele policy of we eat what we kill was abandoned. And as you know, in 2013 we expected a balanced budget. In fact, we expected a budget surplus of several $100 million on a budget of about 4.3 billion, and that had been the practice for the previous 4 years. When the government changed, Mr. Mugabe immediately increased public service salaries by 30%. And this had the effect immediately of pushing a budget surplus into a fiscal deficit of $500 million. And that was the beginning of the problems. These problems were exacerbated by the practices of the next 4 years, where the government was faced with a static revenue base but continued to increase expenditure. So that by June 2018, the fiscal deficit was running at several $100 million a month. It was this fiscal deficit, amounting to 40% of all state expenditure, that was driving the basic instability in the monetary and economic situation in Zimbabwe. It was the primary source of inflation. Now, unlike the period under Gideon Gono, when the Reserve Bank simply printed money to cover a fiscal deficit in massive quantities, we face this time a more subtle process, because the government simply printed money with their computers. If they had a bill, they simply sent you a transfer in the bank. And the transfer in the bank said this was US dollars. In fact, it was air. It didn't exist. It was a fabrication. And by June 2018, they were fabricating money on a vast scale, with the consequence that we started this period of time with domestic debt of about 3 billion, comparatively modest. We had about $3 billion in the bank, and we ended this period in June 2018, when we had about $23 billion of debt, domestic debt, expressed in RTGS dollars. RTGS means real-time gross transfer system. It is the system, it is the economic platform, the electronic platform that all banks in Zimbabwe use for interbank transfers. So when you get a deposit into your account from a client or from the government or from your employer, that's RTGS dollars, electronic dollars. And as a consequence of this build-up in debt, the whole basis of the Zimbabwean economy was under threat. Now, it is amazing that this economy held that value of 1 pretty much up to June. In June, we were trading at about 1.4 to 1, more or less. In fact, in June 2018, I walked into my bank here in Bulawayo, and I drew $100 from my bank account, and it was debited to my RTGS account on one-to-one basis. And that was the last I was able to do that. Because the next thing that happened was Mthuli Mncube walked into his office and he asked to see the accounts. And the first thing that he saw was that the Reserve Bank had an overdraft of $3 billion. Now the constitutional limit on the Reserve Bank overdraft is $700 million. So the Reserve Bank was holding 4 times the legal limit on the overdraft. And the overdraft was government's overdraft. This was Mthuli, this was Manguja printing money for government, covered government deficit. And that completely, not only completely illegal, it wasn't disclosed to Parliament. And therefore the government was violating the Constitution, they were violating the law, the government of the Reserve Bank was committing a cardinal sin. If that happened in Germany, the Minister of Finance and the head of the German Bundesbank would be fired. Here, I don't think anything happened except that people said, my, what a mess. In addition to that, there were about $10 billion of other forms of government debt. Treasury bills, debentures, all sorts of different forms. And most of this had never been reported to Parliament. So again, the bulk of that, and remember, before the minister can borrow any money, he's supposed to ask Parliament for approval. And there's supposed to be a limit on the annual borrowings of government. That was provided for in the 2013 Constitution. And so the Ministry of Finance and the Reserve Bank Governor were in fact violating the Constitution on a massive scale. I was in the Public Accounts Committee and the Finance Committee of Parliament, and I can tell you right now that none of this was ever disclosed to us in Parliament. When Mthuli discovered this, he made a statement to the country that this was the fiscal situation he found. Government was essentially bankrupt. And this could not go on. And it was then that he stated to the country that this stuff in your bank account is not US dollars. Now, we probably all thought that was the case, but we were living in dreamland. And when he made that statement, you'll remember the panic. And the rate on the informal market rate on the RTGS dollar went from 1.4 to 7. Now, what did that mean? Manguja continued to stand at the door of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe and saying 1 to 1, 1 to 1, 1 to 1. When in fact, if I took 1,000 bond notes to the Reserve Bank and I presented them to the cashier and said, please give me 1,000 US dollars, he would look at me as if I was crazy. If he paid me 1,000 US dollars, you know what would happen? In about 3 minutes, there would be a queue outside the Reserve Bank going down First Street in Harare, right to the very end. Because all Zimbabweans would be queuing there to change their money from this rubbish to real money, which you can do something with. And so when that happened, it triggered a whole lot of changes in the economy. Because clearly, this RTGS dollar, the bond note, was not convertible. Clearly, it was not the same. And then the situation occurred where it began to impact on import costs. Now, this is how the financial system works. We receive about $4.5 billion from exporters each year. That's gold, tobacco, diamonds, chrome, etc., etc. 4.5 billion. Another 3 billion comes from the diaspora. Now you might think that's a lot of money. It's not a lot of money. We have 5 million people in the diaspora, and every one of you in this room knows that if you have a problem at home, you're fine. I was at a funeral the other day in a village at Inyazuru outside Mutare, and there was an elderly gentleman there. He was phoning his cousin in New York, who was a merchant banker, and asking him for money for the funeral. Now that's an everyday occurrence. School fees, medical costs, everything, even food. You see the queues outside the money transfer agencies, that's diaspora remittances. In places like Somalia and Sudan, even Ethiopia, 50% of the GDP is remittances. In the Horn of Africa, average remittances per annum are $1,000. Here it's slightly less because the majority of our diaspora are in South Africa. But nevertheless, it's my view that diaspora remittances are not less than $50 a month from each person in the diaspora. We have 5 million people abroad, therefore remittances are over 3 billion. It is the biggest single source of foreign exchange in Zimbabwe. And anybody who disputes that, all you have to do is go to any city in Zimbabwe and look at the informal sector housing. We are consuming 3 million tons of cement a year. We have never, as a country, consumed that amount of cement. And it's not being treated as fertilizer. This is going into buildings. Buildings financed by the diaspora. So the diaspora are an extremely important source of foreign exchange, as in every African state. In fact, many African countries could not survive without the diaspora. So on top of that, we earn about $1 billion a year from other sources, mainly in the services sector, tourism, accountancy, professions, banking, etc., etc. So we're looking at total foreign exchange resources of about $8 billion a year. Now, if you look at our demand, we import about $6 billion a year. So technically, we have a surplus of foreign exchange. But this foreign exchange is in two markets, one controlled by the Reserve Bank and one in the free market, what you might call the informal sector, the guys on the street. And the guys on the street are bigger than the formal sector. Just give you one example. Total swipe transactions at commercial banks last year were about $12 billion, about $1 billion a month. That's everything. Let's go to Pick and Pay, swipe, go to the filling station, if there's fuel, swipe. Those official swipe transactions through commercial banks, $1 billion a month. EcoCash, $2.2 billion a month, double. $25 billion last year. Strive Masiwa is the biggest bank in Zimbabwe by a long way. And the average transaction is small. And the mobility, that is why Ntuli introduced the 2%. The biggest taxpayer in Zimbabwe today is EcoCash. Much bigger than Delta, much bigger than Pick and Pay, much bigger than OK Bazaars. It's EcoCash. Number one taxpayer in the country. And it's easy to collect the money because it's collected electronically. And it comes, you don't have any Zimra, you don't have any paperwork, you don't have to submit any forms, just send the money. You pay it. Okay? Brilliant taxation. So he inherits this, and the next thing you've got to know is that the $3 billion a year that is being swept by Manguja into the Reserve Bank's nostro from exporters' accounts. And this is like, I used to call it a gundwan in your pocket. It's something in your pocket that destroys value. During the Gono days, you know, you put your salary in here, but when you come to take it out of here, it's nothing. Because something between there and there has eaten it. It's the same with Manguja. Okay? He eats money. He eats money. So he takes, so if you're an exporter, like let's say Zimplats, which is exporting, biggest export in the country, $800 million a year. That's about $60, $70 million a month. And Mangutya goes into their bank account. When they receive $10 million, he takes 70% to the Reserve Bank. And then he prints 7 million RTGS dollars and sends it to his bank. Okay? But from September onwards, the RTGS was worth nothing. But he was taking real money. Now, that created distortions in the economy. We went from paying $1 30 odd for fuel to less than 40 cents because Mangutya was allocating the foreign exchange to the fuel importers at that price. And they were importing cheap fuel. So, if I am a transporter and I am traveling from Durban to Lubumbashi and my employer in Durban gives me $3,000 cash for my expenses on the way. That includes bribes at roadblocks. When he arrives at Byte Bridge, he takes 1,000 US and he changes it in the market for bond. And he gets 3,500 bond or 4,000. I changed 10,000 US dollars last week on Monday. I got 4 to 1. I got 40,000 RTGS. So this is a real market, eh? It's not some fantasy. It's not something academic. It's not something in people's minds. He takes that money, 3,500 US bond. He drives into a filling station. He says, fill up. Filling up means 1,500 liters of fuel, which he buys at one RTGS $1.30. And the rest of his 2,000 he puts in his pocket and proceeds to Lubumbashi. As a result, our fuel doubled. We have 2,000 trucks a day transiting Zimbabwe. If each of those people pick up 1,000 liters in Harare, in Zimbabwe, at the border post, just 1,000 liters, that's 2 million liters a day. It doubles our fuel consumption. Just the transit traffic, not anybody else. And you know, Zimbabweans, we are entrepreneurs. Eh? You give people the opportunity to make money like this, and everybody at the border post is making money. You drive in here, you fill up 6, 40, 20, 200 liter drums, you drive across to Messina, you sell it, you bring the rand back, you change the rand, you go and buy some more, you make $2,000 a day. Easy, easy. So these distortions affected everything that they were importing. Pharmaceuticals, fuel, bread, cooking oil were cheap, cheapest in the region. And everybody recognized that. And as a result, the consumption ran away from our capacity to buy. With the result, fuel queues and queues for bread. So these distortions were created by this mountain of RTGS which existed in June 2018 and which fell on Mtuli's head when he opened the door to his office. Now, how to deal with that? How to deal with that? How to deal with the fiscal crisis? Because many of you are economists, eh? A 40% fiscal deficit is crazy. In Italy, what's the deficit? 6%? What's the deficit in Greece? 10, and it's a crisis. Europe wants to expel Italy from the European Union because they're running a 6% deficit. Zimbabwe, 40%. It clearly could not continue. So, we then had the new minister, as soon as he recognizes the size of the problem, and look, this is a very clever guy. He's a very clever guy. And I tell you, he's one of the sharpest minds I've ever met in my life. And he went in there, and he got a new permanent secretary, George, who's also a good banker, excellent man. He changed all the directors. There was almost 100% change of management in the Ministry of Finance when Mtuli came in. And the reason was that the previous management had been there for more than 20 years, including the permanent secretary. Now, I know as a chief executive in private sector, you can't be fresh for 20 years. It's impossible. So he made a complete change. Then he went to the president and he said, look, these problems have to be tackled. So the first thing he did was to fix the fiscal deficit. He raised that 2% tax on money changing, on transfers. And you've got to remember that we have about, in this economy here, this small little economy, the velocity of money here is about 10 to 15 billion dollars a month. That's $500 million a day. Okay? That is changing hands. You know, when you invest in a house, for example, and you go into Halstead's and you pay him $1,000 for roofing or something, or maybe for roof beams, that $1,000 becomes $4,000 within 48 hours in the GDP. Because it goes from here to the suppliers, to this one, to the salaries, and so on, and it multiplies. It multiplies. It's called the velocity of money. So in a small country like this, the velocity of money is huge. So you put a 1% tax on that, you're talking billions. 2% tax is more than double VAT. And VAT is 15% on everything you buy. So this tax was massive. It also is easy to collect. We don't have to ask you for money. We steal money from your pocket. Okay? It's wonderful. We have about 30 taxpayers. They send a transfer to the Ministry of Finance once a month on the 25th, and that's it. Stanbic Bank sends about $15 million a month to Mtuli. Mahara. For nothing. Okay, so it's easy, it's cheap. It was a brilliant move. And although he faced opposition, the president backed him on it. The next thing he did, he said, we have to give Zimbabweans control over the foreign exchange that they earn. So he gave you foreign exchange accounts. Do you remember? The Nostro accounts. At first, nobody trusted the government or the banks. I know I never opened a Nostro account until a couple of weeks ago. Okay? Because I wanted to keep my US in my pocket. Because I didn't trust those Skabengas. So I have a Nostro now, and I'm watching it every day. And you know what they did for my first deposit in US dollars? My bank sent it to the wrong account. They sent it to somebody else. I was ready to kill somebody. Anyway, that's what Mtuli did. He gave you Nostro accounts, which means now, if you receive foreign exchange from your cousin or your brother or your son or your daughter abroad, you can now bank it in the currency in which you're earning. And the bank can't touch that money. And the bank is obliged to give you that money on demand. I'll come to the cash crisis later on, because that's a different problem. So what he did then was to say, right, now I'm going to protect your personal hard currency. And I was talking this morning to one of the senior partners of Webler and Barry. And he said to me, we have a real problem, because we have people who sold their houses in US dollars, and they banked it in their bank accounts, and it's now RTGS. And it's eaten. And it's eaten. You know, and that's a big problem. That's a big problem. It was banked in US dollars in an RTGS account, and now it's eaten. So he did that. That's the second step in the reform process. And the next step he did was to take steps to ensure that people could feel secure about their balances and about the currencies in which they were held. And from September onwards, we have been running a budget surplus. The IMF could not believe what he did. The other side of what he did, apart from increasing the taxes, was to impose strict control on government ministries. So today, no permanent secretary can spend more than his budget. If he spends money for which he has not been allocated resources, he is fired. He is fired immediately, because he's the accounting officer for the ministry. So you'll hear civil servants today saying, we cannot do that today because I don't have the budget. I don't have the money to do it. In the old days, they incurred expenditure, they incurred liabilities, and they just sent the liabilities to the Treasury or the Governor of the Reserve Bank. And they paid them with this funny imaginary money, monopoly money. So he stopped that, with the result that the government has now gone into a fiscal surplus, and we've been running a fiscal surplus now for 7 months. And I want to tell you, the IMF were most impressed. So today we have a fiscal surplus of several $100 million for the first time. In December we paid the bonuses, no borrowing. We paid them with cash, no borrowing. This is a major, major achievement. And any economist who's watching this economy closely would see that there's more stability. In fact, for the last 5 months, M3, money supply, has not grown. So you would have seen during the period 5 years after 2013, money in the bank rose just like this because of this printing of money. Now they've remained static now for 5 months, which means actually now today we have a shortage of RTGS dollars. So what remains now? What remains now is to put the monetary situation into order. Now, as you know, the Reserve Bank Governor is responsible for monetary policy. So the first thing that happened in the reform program was the introduction in one sentence in the monetary policy statement in December 2018. Many people didn't even see it, where Mthuli forced Manguja to put a statement in the monetary policy statement that he made in December that he is going to appoint a monetary policy committee to take charge of money supply and the money situation, cash situation. And the reason for that was Manguja did not want to let go of this, because this is where his power and influence is. If you take that away from him, what is he? He's a supervisor of banks. Okay? That's all he is. But with $3 billion a year going through his account, he controls the distribution of that. So, when the Minister of Finance wants to buy new motor cars, he goes to the Reserve Bank Governor and he says, I want, just appointed a new cabinet, we want 2 cars each, that's $300 each minister, 22 ministers, so that's whatever it is, $70 million. He's going to have that in foreign exchange. And the minute the governor gives him that money in foreign, it's only cost him $1, RTGS. And the RTGS dollar is air. He printed it on his computer. So in fact, those cars are free. Do you understand that? Those cars are free. They've cost nothing. Government didn't use their taxes. They used the foreign exchange flows. The people who paid for those cars were the exporters. Those are the people who paid for those cars. So when the president wants to hire a Dreamliner to fly to Russia, costing $75,000 a day, he goes to the Reserve Bank. The Reserve Bank gives him the money US because that US in the Reserve Bank is free. It's free. It's not free, of course, because he has to take that fuel out of the fuel account. He has money out of the fuel account. He has to take it out of pharmaceuticals. He has to take it out of bread. He has to take it out of cooking oil. So we can't import cooking oil. So you're short of cooking oil. Next week we won't be able to buy bread here, they tell me, because there's got no flour. And that is the reason. Okay? But it meant that this $3 billion is under political control and is being administered politically. And the other problem you have with that, my problem, is that the corruption in there, the temptation is huge. Before Mthuli created the Foreign Currency Allocation Committee, one official in the Reserve Bank was allocating foreign exchange. One. And you know what happens. It's time to eat. You know what happens. That's why that one manager in the Reserve Bank who earns about $7,000 a month, he's building a $48 million US mansion in Harare. 100 rooms. 100 rooms. Yeah. And so you get these guys, they build houses with indoor swimming pools, heated swimming pools, with a helicopter pad on the top. What for? What for? You know, these guys. But that's the nature of the game. So there's huge corruption. I wrote an article the other day where I remember when I was a child growing up at Umznyatini outside Bulawayo here. I grew up in a rural area, and one of my jobs was to shoot baboons in the crops. We were growing maize and so on for feeding cattle. And you know, when the baboons see you coming, hey, that was the guy with the gun, and they ran. Okay, so a good friend of mine, who was my companion in those days on the farm, he said, we catch a baboon. So I said, how do you do that? So we got a paraffin tin with a hole in the top, and we put a mealie cob inside, and we tied the tin with a piece of wire to a log. And the next morning we came, sure, there was a young female baboon with her hand in the tin with the cob. But she wouldn't let go of the cob, so she couldn't get her hand out. So we grabbed her with a rope, and we put her into a cage, and we took her to the workshop, and we sprayed her with white paint. And when she was dry, we waited till the baboons arrived at the fields, and then we let her go. Have you ever seen a troop of baboons being chased by a white it was my companion, I can tell you, his name was Mlochwa. Mlochwa nearly died laughing, I tell you, he nearly died laughing. That is the problem with the Reserve Bank. They've got their hand inside the tin with a mealie cob, and they won't let go. That is why it took 5 weeks of fighting between Mangudya and Ndebele to get the monetary policy statement. What were they fighting about? They were fighting about the mealies in the tin. Because Julie was saying, you let go. That money does not belong to you. It belongs to the gold miners. It belongs to the tobacco guys. What's going to happen when they open the tobacco auctions in Harare in a couple of weeks' time? There is going to be war. Because they're taking 80% of their foreign exchange and giving them RTGS. It's like giving them toilet paper for real food. There's going to be war. Already, the gold producers are simply saying, you know how much gold was delivered by the small scale miners last month in Harare? 20 kgs. 20 kgs from the whole country. Because those guys know the value of the product. They're not going to sell it to the Reserve Bank for nothing. So the background to this was a fight over this $3 billion. Eventually, the president stepped into the ring and said, hey, you two, stop fighting. Let's make a decision. That was last Thursday, 2 weeks ago. And the president said to these two guys, this is what we're going to do. We're going to let Mangudya keep his $3 billion, but we're going to make him pay for it at a market rate. And you and Tuli are going to get your floated currency because you've got to have price discovery. So that was the result. It was a compromise after 5 weeks of fighting. And the fight is not over. I'm not sure whether Mangudya will have his contract renewed tomorrow. His contract comes to an end tomorrow. And I'm not sure he'll be renewed. And if it's not renewed, you know that the baboon with his hand in the thing has had his hand cut off. Okay. So the situation with the monetary policy this year, it was a very important statement. And what they did was that they have floated the currency. So it means in terms of our national economy, we're trading on the open market around about $5.5 billion. And this is traded every day. And I said the other day to an accountants conference in Harare that the bond note is the strongest currency in the region. There were 600 accountants in the room, and you could hear the laughter in First Street. But I said to them, I'm not making a joke. The bond note is worth 4 to 1. What's the rand? 12, 13? I'm told you can get 4 rand for 1 bond here on the street in Bulawayo. 4 rand for 1 bond. It's the strongest currency in SADC. And that is not mahara. That is not nonsense. That is real, because I can get as much foreign exchange as I like if I'm prepared to pay that price. The market is clearing at that price. I can tell you, when I wanted to sell some foreign exchange a week ago, I struggled to find someone with the money. They all wanted to buy it, they agreed the price, but they didn't have the money to buy it. And that's a different problem. So Mtuli has floated the dollar. I don't know what, today I think the black market rate, can I call it the black market rate? Most of you guys are informal traders anyway. Is it a white market rate? I don't know. Anyway, the informal sector, today the price was 4.2. Now, the problem with that is that the 2.5, which Manguja says he's going to be buying. So you look at the price today at the Reserve Bank for gold. He's taken the international price in US dollars and he's converted it at 2.5, which means the gold producers are getting $28 effectively for a product that's worth $52 a gram. They're getting less than half the real value of their product. That is why they're not selling. They will rather sell to people who bring cash to them in the bush. And there are plenty of those. So I'm afraid this debate on the currency issue is not over. In the monetary policy statement, they said that the governor would be buying foreign exchange from the exporters at a market-derived rate. That's not 2.5. It may be 3.5 or 3.7 today. We've yet to see the emergence of an informal market in amongst the banks. In fact, at this point in time, we don't quite know how to trade foreign exchange in the banks because there's no platform for it. I know that last week on Friday, there were intense debates in Harare, in the Ministry of Finance, about giving banks instructions on how they were to trade, because what we want is a genuine free market price. Like the rand in South Africa, you go to the bank, there it is, 13.6. So you know today you're getting 13.6 rand for a US dollar. We want the same thing here. Now once that happens, then price discovery becomes a bit easier. You know, when you have shortages and you have this uncertainty about the price of the product, of the material, of the stuff that you're using for exchange on the street, which is called money, then you have exploitation of the consumer. And that is why, if you walk sometimes into a pharmacy here, you'll find that they are changing their US dollar prices at 10 to 1. Why? Because they can do so. You don't want it? Bugger off. Because they've got plenty of customers at 10 to 1. But they're exploiting you. They're exploiting you. And that is going to happen. So the only way to resolve that is to have these products in free supply. You heard the terrible story about the cholera medicine in Harare, where a private sector businessman gave the Ministry of Health $10 million to import cholera medicines from India. And they increased their price. The officials, Ministry of Health officials, increased the price by 10 times. Now, that sort of thing is going on all over the place. And people are making money. And the only way to attack that is competition. Just have a look at what happened in this town with the introduction of the Zupka buses. The taxi operators were charging $2 for a ride. Eh? When the buses arrived, what happened? Half. It's called competition. It is the only way to curb the avariceness and the greed in the private sector. Okay? So what Mthuli wants is an open, free market. And I believe that if Mthuli had been allowed to take that $3 billion a year away from the Reserve Bank, because I don't think the Reserve Bank should be in the allocation business at all, and had been able to put that on the local market, I think the rate would have gone down much further. The rate would have gone down to 2.5. Because suddenly we are trading $8 billion in a $6 billion market. And if you think that that is nonsense, why do we have a surplus of foreign exchange in our accounts today of $700 million? It is 20 years since we had surplus foreign exchange in Zimbabwe. We have 2 months import cover. Where does it come from? It's this wretched economy of ours. And I tell you, the people who are most shocked are the IMF. Mthuli is in Washington today talking to the IMF. And the IMF think he's a witch doctor. Because, he does these things and suddenly, we have a deficit of 40%. 6 weeks, we have a surplus. How? How do you do that? We have a foreign currency shortage, we have shortages of everything. Suddenly we have $700 million in the bank. And Mthuli went to the IMF with a check from the Ministry of Finance and paid them the arrears 3 weeks ago. He paid them. He said, you guys have been sugaring us for years, here's your bloody money. and that came from our own resources. So you must not think that we are not making progress. We are making progress. And I think if Mthuli tells me personally that the president is backing him all the way. And I think if Mthuli is allowed to complete this process of reform, I think, and I've said this publicly in many, many forums, I said by the middle of this year, we're in a different country. One of the things that will happen now is that inflation is going to come down. What happened was with the RTGS dollar, we had this mountain of RTGS dollars, $23 billion RTGS. And it's like a dam wall. You've seen that pictures in Brazil when that dam wall broke. Right, that's what happened to us. We had this big dam wall, and behind it we had $23 billion of RTGS money. And what Mthuli did with that statement, that one statement, that the stuff over there is not US dollars, was to put a hole in the wall. Now, what's happened now is that the water behind the dam is down by 2/3 because it's devalued by the market. So it means, the bad news for you is that 2/3 of what you had in the bank is gone. Okay? This time it wasn't 100% like Gono, it was just 2/3. But it's gone, and it will not be coming back. But the good thing about it is that at least now we have stability, fiscal and monetary stability. And I think that the Zimbabwean economy, the next thing we've got to do is restore the value of exports. I published an article this week, which maybe is in the paper, I don't know, on corruption in the fuel industry. But I want to tell you this, I've calculated that the amount of money that the Reserve Bank was taking from exporters was equivalent to $4.5 billion a year. Now the exports are $4.5 billion. So the Reserve Bank was stealing from every exporter 50% of the value of their exporters. Now you can't take 50% of the value of exporters away from an exporter and expect him to survive. Hey, you can't. He will die. And already we had Rio Tinto say they were closing their mines. Afrashine closing ferrochrome exports. And that would have become a pandemic if this statement had not happened. At least now we've restored sort of 90% of value, because now the exporter will get much more significant RTGS payments. But that is not the solution. The solution is to have a free market environment here for foreign exchange. Allow everybody to buy and sell. Yesterday at the cabinet meeting in Harare, they resolved to make put fuel on open import license, as it was during the GNU. So I had lunch today with the contractor here in town, We yesterday ran out of fuel, and all his plants and operators were closed down yesterday. And you've seen the near riots in town here. And I said to him, well, as a result of the decision yesterday in the cabinet, you can now ask one of these fuel traders to bring you in a truckload of fuel for yourself. He has foreign exchange in his Nostro account. So he's now going to go this afternoon. And you know what price fuel is at the port? At Maputo or Beira? It's 43 cents a litre. 43 cents a litre. So you can buy fuel there, you can bring it into the country, and you'll still have fuel here for less than $1 a litre, even after you've paid the tax. So that was a cabinet decision yesterday. And that deals to some extent with the corrupt cartel that has been controlling the fuel industry. So you must not look at the MPS, the Monetary Policy Statement, as a statement in isolation, but as part of the overall program of reform which is currently underway in the country. And this reform program, I think, will lead to a sharp reduction in inflation in the second half of this year. I'm forecasting 5% a month instead of 56% a month 56% last month. And the reason for that is we've devalued what's behind the wall, so we can handle what's left. Okay, we can handle that. And the other thing too is if you give our exporters full value on their export earnings, they are going to invest. I had lunch the other day with the financial director of Anglo American, third largest mining company in the world. They used to control 40% of the Zimbabwean economy. They only have one asset left in the country. That's Anglo Platinum in the Midlands. I think it's called Unki. He told me they've invested $500 million. I said to him, what will you do if you start getting full value for your exports? He said, we'll double our investment immediately. And many exporters will do exactly the same. And there's no shortage of money for that kind of expansion because it's export driven. Zimplat's average cost of borrowings for Zimplat's is 3% per annum. If you get money at 3%, you can do anything. You can't do that at 20% per month. Chambadzo. And we are close to Chambadzo with our commercial banks. Believe me, you borrow money from our commercial banks, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. Right, gee, it's not an academic presentation. I don't know whether there are many academics here, but for me, that's the monetary policy. I support it 100%. I think the Manguja problem, the Gono problem, still has to be resolved, and the main problem there is how many people are eating from the trough, including some big chefs. And but I believe that with the support of the President, I think that Mtuli will be able to deal with that later on this year, and we'll be in a new country by December.
From that presentation, I'm judging from the faces in the room who are all itching to ask some questions, right?
Edddie, in your view, what do you think should be done to have a situation whereby we agree to disagree without being disagreeable? I'm talking about the ruling party and the opposition. Now, if I recall well, Ndebele gave a very nasty comment about this reform. My question now is, what is his motive? Is he agreeing to disagree without being disagreeable, or he has got another agenda? I'm not raising a political comment here, but as a person, I'm saying, which direction are we moving as a nation? Because as long as we don't pursue that direction, I don't think we are going to succeed.
The simplest thing that I would like you to unpack is the issue of food. I don't believe, I'm not an economist, I'm a doctor in a different field, but I don't believe that we can develop an economy by increasing taxes. What I think is that I think we should be focusing on putting money into the pockets of the people. How long what is the time frame? Because you sound so optimistic, but what is the time frame for any ordinary person on the street to be able to survive, live happily with the families and be able to support their families? I just wanted to unpack that.
I'm a 20-year veteran of the MDC. I joined the MDC when it was formed in 1999. Morgan Tsvangirai was one of my best friends, and we were very, very close and so on. And I don't want to criticize my colleagues, but I just want to say one thing. Mnangagwa won the last election by 300,000 votes. And he didn't manipulate the count. In the past, 2002, Morgan beat Mugabe by 400,000 votes. But the South Africans allowed ZANU-PF to manipulate the count so that he was denied the presidency. That's true. The South African judges who came up to investigate said that was the situation, and that report has never been released. 2008, Morgan won 54% of the vote, Mugabe 27%. That's true. It's not fiction. It's also true that Mnangagwa beat Chamisa by 300,000 votes. Had he lost the first vote by less than 50%, in the runoff, Chamisa would have beaten Mnangagwa by a wide margin because Chamisa's support was climbing. So he was very lucky to survive. It was a gamble, but he survived. But he's president. And I said to Chamisa, if you want to make a contribution, and to Biti and his colleagues, if you want to make a contribution to Zimbabwe, a positive contribution, accept that you are the opposition. How can you claim, if you lost 1,500 out of 2,000 councillor seats, 1,500 went to ZANU, 500 went to MDC, how can you claim to have won the presidency? It's not possible. If ZANU wins 70% or 65, 70% of the members of parliament and you get 32%, how can you expect to win the presidency? Even Boramasango, on a massive scale, it's not going to happen. So I said, you should accept this as you're now the opposition. And I said to him, just imagine if you walked into the stadium with the president, hand in hand, at the inauguration. Just imagine the impact. 29 African heads of state there. Hey, just imagine the impact. 60,000 people. I was there. Instead of which he boycotts it. Mnangagwa reaches out and says, let's talk. He says, only if you accept that I defeated you and I am the legitimate president. It's not going to happen. Mnangagwa is there until 2023. Okay? Let's accept it. And BT got a lot of praise for handling the economy. But who introduced the reforms? It was not BT. It was Chinamasa. And I was in Parliament when he announced the reforms. And all BT did in the next 5 years was to maintain the policy strategies that were introduced by ZANU before he took power as Minister of Finance. He ran a disciplined ship. He was the one man in the cabinet that Mugabe was afraid of. BT. He's a fine intellectual. Eh? He's a tough guy. He's not someone you want to come up against in an alley or in a courtroom. But on current policy, when he took on Mtuli in the House of Assembly, Mtuli ate him up and spat him out. Okay? He's no match for Mtuli. Mtuli is a world-class economist. Comes out top bracket. The second question was the question of taxation. I agree completely. We are the most heavily taxed people on earth. Average taxation in South Africa is 25% of GDP. We are 35%. And what I said to Mtuli when we were discussing the 2%, I said we should introduce the 2%, but I think we should cut PAYE, even drop PAYE. Drop PAYE. Why bother collecting money, all this little bit of money from everybody? Okay, just drop it. Maybe introduce a wealth tax. So people earning more than $10,000 a month, they pay a wealth tax. say 25% straight. Unfortunately, he wasn't prepared to do that, not at the same time. And I urged him during the budget discussion, cut taxes, direct taxes on the formal sector. Let's reduce our company tax to Botswana levels. Let's say 15%, like in Mauritius, flat 15%. We'd collect more money, I think, on a bigger tax base, and it'll be less bureaucratic. I think that is a debate we have to fight, and that's something that guys like you should support us. Lobby your MPs, lobby your decision makers, many of whom there is a big group of Ndebeles in the parliament, in the cabinet. Many of them new, and they don't understand these issues. But I agree with you completely. We need to broaden the base of our taxation system. I think 60 to 70% of our economy is informal. And those guys, until the 2%, were not paying anything. Now they're paying a little bit. But I agree with you completely, as soon as possible. But the answer, ladies and gentlemen, is growth, 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 growth. And what we should be doing is backing our export industries. We've grown the biggest tobacco crop in our history. And who grew it? You know, in the old Rhodesian days, there were 1,100 growers. You listening to me? 1,100 farmers grew the entire tobacco crop. Today, we have 150,000 people growing tobacco. And we've just grown the biggest crop in our history. You know, I said to the former Secretary of Agriculture from the old days, what's his name? Anyway, don't worry about it. I said to him, could you ever imagine a time when 150,000 growers would grow a record tobacco crop? He said, never. I never believed it was possible. I thought these Marungus were magicians on the farms. We've got to back those people. We've got to pay them their full earnings. This year, if we do what we're doing to them right now, they will not be able to repay their loans. And we've got to get our export industries growing fast. And that is not difficult. We are the most resource-rich country in the world. We have more resources per capita than Saudi Arabia. Did you know that? On a value per capita basis. We are the richest people on earth. And the poorest people. Unlock the giant. Unlock the giant. You know, and if we do that, then our demands, education for example, we mustn't cut back on education. The object must be to give every Zimbabwean child a decent education. We need access for all for health. But that costs money. And only in a growing economy, the problem with Mugabe was he expanded the social sector enormously in the first 10 years of independence, but he didn't grow the economy. The Chinese know how to do it. The first thing you do is infrastructure. That follows with development. And the Chinese have not raised living standards from nothing. They have built up their economy. And that's why, you know, China, you take 1975, China was poorer than Zimbabwe is today. Now it's the third richest country in the world, second richest country in the world. More than 1 billion Chinese have been lifted out of poverty. Do you think that's possible here? Of course it's possible here. Of course it's possible here. We are hard-working people. You speak to any industrialist here. You want to... I have a friend in Johannesburg who's relocating from Johannesburg to Bulawayo right as we speak now with his factory. His entire factory, all his work. Why? Because his workers are Zimbabwean. And he says, if this is Zimbabwe, I want to be in Bulawayo. That's a true story. He's moving his factory to the industrial sites here. And he's going to be manufacturing valves for the international market here. And his workers are Zimbabwean. And he's moving here because of our human capital. That's the potential. At the back here, we had a question. What was it about? I'm getting lost here. I'm getting so enthusiastic about this. What? Inflation. Yeah, inflation. That's a very important point. Our guys here maintain inflation by collecting a basket of goods. Okay, it's quite wide. The American professor in the United States, who calculates the 258%, he works on various other indicators, including the old mutual rate. You know what the old mutual rate is? Old Mutual is a company in Southern Africa which is quoted on the Zimbabwe stock market. But it's also quoted in London and South Africa. So if you buy Old Mutual shares in Harare, you can sell the shares in London. So people who are here with money, big money, enough money, go onto the market here and they buy Old Mutual shares and they take them to London or to South Africa and they sell them. And because of that, you pay $7 a share here for a $2 or a $3 share. So this guy takes what he calls the Old Mutual rate and he computes a theoretical inflation rate. But it's based on money. But of course, the Old Mutual rate is a very narrow market, it's a very small market. If a guy's stuck here with $10 million, what does he do with it? He takes it to the stock market, he buys 10 million US dollars worth, 10 million RTGS dollars worth of old bond, and but as a result the market grows, so it's very volatile. So I think the 56%, which is still hyperinflation, is more reliable than the 258. Okay? There was a question over here. Sure. Yeah, fuel. You need to read my article about fuel today. If you look at my blog is just go Google Edddie Cross, and the first item you come up is my blog, and you'll see the latest letter there. Every week I publish a letter. Is on fuel. The answer to fuel is to do what Elton Mangoma did in 2009. When he was appointed minister, he had Noxum. You remember Noxum? Noxum had a monopoly on fuel imports. He discovered that Noxum was completely corrupt. Completely corrupt. So he ring-fenced it and closed it down. And he took the debts of Noxum, which were substantial, they owed money all over the world, and he put it into a special fund which we've been paying for 6 cents a litre since that time, 2009, liquidating that liability. Then what did he do? He divided Noxum into two companies, Petrotrade for retail distribution and NOIC for infrastructure. And what he said was infrastructure, government owned, government controlled, is not a trader. So he then opened up the market and said anybody can bring in fuel. We had no exchange control, we had no price control. So he said if you have got money, if you've got money, you bring fuel. So what they did was they brought fuel. And if any of you will remember, February the 17th, 2009, was when Chinamasa announced the reforms. Up to that point in time, there wasn't a single filling station in Zimbabwe with fuel. Do you remember? 2008, there wasn't one filling station selling fuel. Where do we get our fuel from? Informal sector. Okay? And what happened then? In 10 days, fuel was in free supply. 10 days. Where did the money come from? Who did that? It was the private sector. And although prices were quite high, very quickly they came down to world market levels. And all that Mangoma did then was to say each filling station must publish their prices on the forecourt. That's Mangoma. And so if you've got to publish your prices on the forecourt, and you look down the road, over the road, and there your competitor is, and he's 5 cents cheaper than you, you know you're not going to do any business. It's like the buses and the combis. Competition. And that was it. Next 4 years, no fuel queues, no problems, no issues. Competitive price, global market levels, finish. And then ZANU arrives. first issue was, are we ready for the Zim dollar? And this comes to the cash shortages. What is a currency? What is a currency? You take the US dollar. I'm sorry I haven't got any US dollars in my pockets. But if you look at a $100 bill, 100 US dollar bill, what is it? It's about 2 cents of cotton, maybe 1 cent of glue and other bits and pieces, and a little bit of printing ink. It's worth about 5 cents. But you can take that anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world, and people will accept it as money. I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, if you want to test the value of a currency, just go to prostitutes. You know, and ask your prostitute, what kind of currency would you like? You can Bangkok, it'll be US dollars. It won't be baht, it'll be US dollars. And 73% of all the cash in the world is US dollars. So when Zimbabwe dollarized, we had to buy our dollars because we can't print them here. We might try, but if we do print US dollars, there will be a military invasion. The American army will be here in 5 minutes and will shoot the Minister of Finance and the Governor of the Reserve Bank. What do we do? How do we get US dollars? They don't grow on trees. What we have to do is we have to take money from our Nostro accounts earned by our exporters, paid for by our diaspora shamwaris, and we put it in a plane and we fly it to New York. And in New York, the Treasury prints US dollars at 5 cents per $100 bill, and it takes $100 of real money from us and gives us new money. And we fly it back here. We give it to Stanbic Bank, we give it to Barclays Bank, they give it to you, and you take it into the market or you put it under your pillow at home, but it vanishes. That's what happens. And we've been buying $15 million worth of foreign currency now for the past 2 years. $15 million a month. That's a lot of money. And do you see any in the banks? Do you see any US dollars around? No. Because the demand is greater than the supply. Now the same with bond. When they issued the bond note, it was a paper currency. First they did the coins. The coin was a great idea. The bond note, oh, we weren't so sure about that. But it's turned out to be quite a success. Bond is in demand in South Africa. You go to Messina, you see them waving bond notes on the side of the road. It's money. It's cash. You can use it to buy things outside the country. Now, it's my view, and it's Ntuli's view, that in fact we need a new currency. Why? Because we have to have a means of transaction on the street. The problem with Gideon Gono was that he printed too much. That's the only sin. When I grew up, when I went working here in Ndebele land, I was working on a ranch at Nyamatlovo. My salary, every Zim dollar that I earned, every Rhodesian dollar I earned was worth £2.50. It was worth 4 US. At independence in 1980, after 16 years of sanctions and the war, the dollar was worth 2 US dollars. It's because it was managed properly. Look at the Metikash today. Look at the Pula. The Pula is more valuable than the Rand. It's still a local currency. Look at the Kwacha. It's just a question of management. This is what Ntuli says. Let's have a monetary policy committee that will run this. It will be made up of professionals. until he tells me the monetary is going to be appointed. He keeps on telling me that. I still haven't seen it. But I'm sure when one governor of the Reserve Bank leaves at the end of the month, I'm sure it'll be. So, and if there is a monetary policy committee, like in South Africa, the monetary committee there, when they meet, it's of national significance. Everybody goes to the meeting because what they're saying is important. And then what we'll do is we'll put the issue of the currency in their hands. We'll say, right, you run the money supply. And we'll need about $2.6 billion to meet the needs of the street. But I don't believe that currency, it'll be the strongest currency in the region. It'll be the Zim dollar. I don't know what we'll call it. We need to think of a name. Chibuku 2. We need to think of something. But I think it may call it the Zimbabwe, just keep it the Zimbabwe dollar. But I think we'll introduce a new currency, and I'm quite certain it'll make a big contribution. The other thing too, which all economists will understand, is that when you have your own currency, you're doing exactly what the Americans do. You're taking paper and turning it into money. And therefore you're strengthening your reserve bank balance sheet, which is very important. Now you had 4 questions. 3.
Yeah.
Okay, what were the others?
The second one, what is being done to boost production in the exports?
Oh, that's simple. That's simple. If we gave our export industries their full value, you don't need incentives. You don't need incentives. They will. Our cost of production for chrome is the lowest in the world. Our chrome is #1 in the world. Everybody wants it. Everybody wants it. Our platinum industry. Our platinum is 1/3 or even 1/3 cheaper than South Africa. That is why South African platinum companies like Implats in South Africa are investing here. Because they can produce the product cheaper here than they can produce in South Africa. In South Africa, they're mining platinum 2 kilometers down. Here, the deepest platinum mine is 150 meters. It's a different ball game completely. And if we simply gave we at the moment are doing the opposite. We are taking money, we are taxing our export industries to death with this transfer pricing mechanism of these tsotsis in the Reserve Bank. If we simply gave them the full value of what they produced, they would expand production rapidly. We'd be a 15% per annum growth economy for the next 20 years. I've got no doubt about that at all. Take lithium. We've got 80% of the lithium resources of the world. What is the car of tomorrow? Electricity. Hey? What batteries do they have? Lithium batteries. Where's the lithium? Iripano. What's the other question?
Why were all these implementations not necessary in 2009?
2009, because we liberalized completely. We were the freest economy in the world. And, but the problem was that when ZANU won the election in 2013, you know, they'd been in power for so long. They couldn't break the mold. And you know, the old man was so strong. Eh? You know what happened to people who opposed Mugabe? Yeah, he was a tough guy. People were very afraid of him. Even his cabinet ministers. I have been at State House where I've seen a cabinet minister come in to see Mugabe on his knees. A grown man on his knees, crawling. Chef. Okay? And the problem was that when they imposed their old policies on us, and they took away the freedoms, do you know what the growth per annum between 2009 and 2013 was? You know what the growth per month was, per annum? 70%, not 7, 70. Look at the numbers. 2009, total revenues to the state, 916 million. 2010, 1.7 billion, double. 2000, what are we looking at? 9, 10, 11 was 2.7. 12 was 3.8. 13, 4.3. Average growth per annum was 7.0. That's why I said, unlock the monster. That is the real Zimbabwean economy. And what happened was they just strangled it. Because in 2014, the revenue to the state went down. Didn't go up, went down. Why? They took away the freedoms, imposed exchange control, imposed price control, took money away from the exporters. Because I quite agree with you that the appointment of a committee to allocate foreign exchange was completely in juxtaposition to his position on an open free market economy. But it comes back to the political dialogue in government. That Mthuli has no political legs. Okay? He has no roots. He doesn't belong to a political party. In fact, he told me the other day he's never been to ZANU-PF headquarters. And he says, I don't intend to go there. I don't take my instructions from ZANU. I take my instructions from cabinet and from the president. So he has to rely on the president totally. The president himself, I want to tell you this, the president himself is a very isolated individual. Look at ZANU. If you take Joyce, if you take the G40, you take Mugabe, you take Grace, what are you left with? A village in Shulugwi? I'm not lying. You look at the number of people who are really close to Mnangagwa and who support him unequivocally. The Midlands Mafia, the Karanga, and you find that there are a handful around him. His enemies are many, and you see that in the policy sector particularly. Someone like Manguja is a Mugabe man. He's one of the past. He's from the past, okay, and many of his ideas are in complete. And Mthuli has not been able to handle that because that's a political issue. He has to rely on that. That's why the president has stepped into the ring 2 weeks ago and say, right, this argument stops here. What's your argument? What's your argument? Right, this is what we're going to do. Cabinet on Tuesday, announce it on Wednesday. Finish. But the president had to do that. Mthuli wasn't. Mthuli didn't want that. Mthuli was fighting Manguju for an open, free economy. Okay? He's quite right. The bond will be gone in June. We'll demonetize the bond in June. I'm quite sure of that. You'll have to bank it, and then we'll burn it. And we're going to then introduce a proper currency. In fact, Mthuli will be in China shortly, Hong Kong or China, and he'll be negotiating to print a new currency. And we'll bring the new currency here and we'll issue it properly. And it'll then be a proper currency, properly controlled by a professional committee, independent of the Reserve Bank governor and independent of the Minister of Finance. That's crucial. That's exactly what happens in South Africa. That is why in America, for example, when Trump wanted, when the head of the American Central Bank stood up and said, I'm raising interest rates, Trump said no. Trump threatened to fire him. He couldn't fire him because he's independent. He told the President of the United States to go to hell. That's where we need to be. Because so long as politicians control these things, they act in their own interests. So I think that Mthuli was quite right. Where he was wrong was when he said right at the beginning, let's go for the rand. He misunderstood that. The rand is not an option. This rand monetary area won't accept us. And we would destabilize the rand. The South African Reserve Bank doesn't want Zimbabwe anywhere near us. We're like a polecat. That might change if we are consistent in our policies, if we really do keep to this track. But I'm telling you, Mthuli this week is in Washington. He's negotiating with the IMF to get a new staff monitor program, which is the beginning of re-engagement. It's where we were with BT in 2010. And all of that deal went to, that was the Lima Agreement, that all collapsed following the basically delinquency of the latter years of the Mugabe regime. Now he's back there. I'm quite certain he's going to get it. And I'm quite certain that we'll be on a new track. When the annual meetings are held, it'll be announced there. But I don't think there's anything inconsistent in what he's doing. I think the inconsistency comes from the political situation in which he finds himself. If he didn't have the support of the president, if I was him, I would go back to Geneva. The big thing that hasn't been done so far is the revision of salaries. And I think, you know, this is an urgent matter. What the President and Mthuli said was, we're in for a period of austerity, but this will lead to stability and then it'll lead to growth. And I think they are right, that order. Austerity, stability, growth. We have to adjust salaries, and we have to adjust them now. Now. And I think that the longer we delay, the more pressures there are going to be on the state and on employers. The majority of employers have already implemented increases in the private sector. If they hadn't, they're delinquent, because their people can't survive on their old salaries. They have to adjust salaries. It also has to be gradual. I think, for example, we could increase salaries in the public sector by 25% now without affecting the fiscal deficit. And I think that is what we should be doing. And the sooner we get on with it. One of the things that I am concerned about is the adjustment of salaries, because after the 2009 dollarization, we had huge discrepancies. Some people were overpaid, some people were underpaid. The conversion rates for salaries were different and so on. There was no guidelines. It was shambolic. So in Harare, for example, a street sweeper gets $470 a month. A municipal policeman gets $1,100 US a month, whereas a ZRP patrol officer gets $370. So why the difference? The difference was that the municipality of Harare were able to convert their salaries at a different rate to those of the rest of the country. Those discrepancies, those problems have to be resolved. The other problem, which I think is urgent, is the plight of our professionals in the public service. You can't pay a doctor $700 a month, even if Chiwenga says he's not a professional. Okay, it's just not. It's not justified. It's not humane. It's not real. The guy's been at university for 10 years, and he comes out and he works in a government department, you know, and he gets $700 a month, and that's it. Please, you've got professionals in our midst. They are crucial. In the federal days, let me just tell you a bit of wisdom from the past. In the federal days, we had a man called Sir Cornelius Greenfield, who was the Minister of Finance for the federal government. Cornelius said, the rule of thumb for the public services should get 80% of the salary of their private sector counterparts. So, in the federal days, permanent secretaries were treated like chief executives in the private sector. A permanent secretary in the federal days bought a nice house, he had a nice motor car, he went on holiday every year, his children went to private schools. Today, look at our headmasters, our headmistresses. You don't have an education system without headmistresses and headmasters. They are crucial. Speak to any parent. It is the headmaster, it is the head teacher who makes or breaks a school. And we see these people, I see these people. I give them lifts in rural areas. They've got shoes with holes in the floor, in the bottom. Their shirts they're torn shirts. Their suits are worn on the elbows. They look like peasants because they're earning nothing. You know, and for me, those are the issues that have to be addressed first. Our minimum wages are probably too high. We have an average minimum wage of $250 US. That's what it was. In our region, it's 76. In the region, it's 76. In China, it's 32. $240 average minimum wage US is too much. So maybe our minimum wage needs to stay where it is, but let's push up our prices of our professionals, all of whom are sitting in this room today. If it comes true, you all owe me money, eh?
Good morning and welcome to The Entrepreneurs, a show that seeks to inspire and advise on financial literacy. My name is Lady K, and today on the show I'm with Randy, a marketing designer. We are talking about his enterprise. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, my pleasure.
Yeah.
My first question to you is, what is a marketing designer?
Okay, I guess there's two words that are involved there. The marketing aspect and the design aspect of things.
Okay.
Yeah, the design aspect of things is where I actually started my career in just creativity and just being visually creative. That's my skill. And the marketing side of things is about selling and understanding products. So with marketing design, yeah, literally just mixing the two together, understanding how to visually either illustrate or produce products in an appealing way to a particular market.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's about being creative,
Yeah.
and marketing the creative
And
product.
marketing, exactly.
Okay, so what skills do I need to get started? Like for one to be a marketing designer, what do you need?
I don't know if art is a skill. I guess, yeah. In this modern world, yeah, you have to be a bit tech literate with the computers that we're using. When we started, all you needed was a pen and pencil, and you could make something out of that there.
Okay.
But these days, you're going to have to be computer literate to some extent, yeah, to be able to use the applications as was Zenzele in the modern time. So I guess basic art and literature knowledge, and then yeah, a passion for selling things and creativity. I don't know if those are skills though, yeah, but that's I think what you need basically.
Okay,
yeah.
Talking about designs,
yeah.
What do you design exactly?
What do I design? Okay, I design from, I call it visual design. I do anything which is we call it, let's see, what is the term here? Anything generated from the computer. Yeah, so it can be an idea, someone wants to do something like a card, letterhead.
Okay.
So from individual's perspective or from the corporate's perspective. So it can be for business or for personal. So those are the things I design for personal people and also for the business side of things. For personal individuals, you're looking at gifts and cards in that aspect, t-shirts, those type of things there. Also in the corporate world, you get more documentation, paperwork, which sometimes also requires design side of things or actual products. Yeah, that's what I mostly spend my day designing.
Okay,
Yeah.
I understand you have knowledge on typography,
yeah.
digital marketing, and online presence.
Yeah.
Would you please maybe explain to me what that means?
Okay.
Maybe starting with the typography.
Okay, so typography, which is extracted from the word type, which is one of the most basic words we use in graphic design. Type is basically a style of writing.
Okay.
Yeah, so the style of writing and the style of lettering usually communicates differently to different audiences that you're looking to communicate with. So you'll find that simple style, simple type of writing communicates in a very formal and simple way. Then you've got your abstract styles of writing and abstract styles of typography, which we use like your graffiti styles or calligraphy and things like that there. So it's just a different way of communicating. It can be the same message in bold, simple font, or something which is stylish and which is what we look at in typography.
Okay,
Yeah,
and moving on to digital marketing.
Digital marketing, since we've grown up in a world which became digital. I'm a 90s baby, but I've grown up in the digital world. And in the 90s, things were not as digital as per se. But in this time where everything on our phone, everything works from our phones and everything is mobile and stuff like that, the digital marketing mostly looks at ways of not going with traditional marketing, signs and things which people interact with, as they go through their day-to-day lives. But now, since we interact mostly with our phones and our devices, it's a way of just getting a message across on those platforms there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then online presence.
Online presence just talks about how we interact with people online, kind of, yeah, in the web, on the internet, and yeah, on the web as per se, on the internet, etc. But your presence is basically how you want people to relate to you, how you want people to perceive you as per se. So just like how we have physical presence, you look nice, etc., you like this kind of hair, and then online also you can give yourself a certain kind of appeal as to a way people should look at you. So individuals have certain influence in that space, so do businesses as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, as a designer,
Yeah.
what important questions do you ask from a client before you do designs?
Okay. For me, with my experience now, I've learned to kind of get to understand certain things about their business.
Okay.
Yeah, starting with from a certain book that I read, in also expanding my knowledge in design. One of the most important questions in understanding someone or business or something is understanding the why. Why does someone want to do something? What is their actual reason for getting into that thing? And what do they expect to get out of it? So you get to understand that person's vision or that business's core values. That gives me that then gives me room to then become creative in that space then.
Yeah, to know what's really needed.
Exactly. Yeah, just to get to their pain points. We call them pain points.
Oh.
Yeah, those issues that they just need addressed by someone who they can, something that they can't do for themselves when they come to us designers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's your goal as a marketing designer?
What is my goal?
Yeah.
I think ideally, when I got into it, my main idea was to get into the media space. Okay. So yeah, I like visual illustrations and media-related creativity. So my goal is to kind of have a positive influence in the media space, and as from my understanding how media is also a form of communication, just to create a clean and safe environment in the media space, and also just to channel, to make that space progressive from a Zimbabwean perspective and a global view as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in your experience as a marketing designer, what can you say constitutes a successful marketing designer?
What constitutes a successful marketing designer? I'm not sure. A big check? I don't think so. Well, people have different levels of what they consider their success. Personally, I as I said, my mind would be how influential I could be, how positively influential I could be in my surroundings, from my community to the city and country and the world as per se. So just being able to influence people in a positive way from my side of things, creating stuff that influences positively. That's just also being a brand ambassador of positivity. That's my goal in terms. That's my success. So whether it comes with a big paycheck, that would be a plus. At least my kids will go to private school and stuff. But yeah, that's how I see my success.
Okay, so it's about being influential in the environment that you live in.
Yeah.
But what are the common mistakes that are made by designers? Marketing designers.
Okay, I'm not sure whether this is from a personal perspective or on a business side of things. I guess growing up in Bulawayo, I've been exposed to a few bigger markets. I've worked in Harare before, I've worked in South Africa. And that exposure kind of just gave me a chance to see the world in a different way. And that helps me correct my mistakes based on my experience. So as a designer, what I would just suggest for other designers is go out there and see the world and have a broader world view, have a broader picture of what the world is, and therefore you'll find your space of where exactly you want to be in there.
Okay, yeah. Can you justify for me the fact that every company needs a marketing designer? Well,
this is the 21st century. I hope there was a camera which I could actually... So yeah, in the 21st century, this is the third industrial revolution, I guess, was kind of like digitalization. So if you are not going digital, also selling. That's just to say it plainly. And if you're not influencing in those digital spaces, again, also selling. So that's the one thing I would say to companies that don't have a creative digital person in their body as well. Yeah, that's just going against the grain.
So tell me about your experience in the previous companies that you worked for as a designer.
Okay, I haven't worked for so many people. I've worked with a lot of people, but working for, my experience was initially out of school. I started an apprenticeship after my O-levels. I got an opportunity to get into a company that was offering an apprenticeship. So that was my first employer. That went well. I managed to successfully get out of that there. And from then, I guess I just had the urge to produce my ideas, to do things in a way of which I guess I wanted to do them the way I liked them. So that's how I got into the enterprise space of things. I started a business at a very early age. I think I was about 18. And I was just doing personalized t-shirts and branding for individuals and businesses as well. So I've only ever been employed a few other times after that there. And my experience has been, my goal is mostly growth. I always try and get into a space, and if I can grow from that space, that would be the idea.
So is there a particular organization that you would want to work for?
That I would want to work for? My goals are, as I said, the media space. In Africa, Channel O would be a nice place to find myself. They're influential, and I think they're really doing a lot for youth and the urban culture. Those are the kind of spaces I'd like to see myself. Google is a nice place to find yourself. Yeah, those kind of spaces, I think, people that really influence the modern culture and life. Yeah, those are the people that I would really love to get to sit and work with.
Okay.
Yeah.
So since you started at the age of 18, yeah, you were young by then.
I was.
So by that time, also go fund marketing design, or it was something that you were always doing, even at home?
At home, I guess, from Ndebele, I was just considered the guy who just knew how to solve problems. I was that MacGyver. Yeah, so after school, finding myself in a design studio, I guess I started solving problems in that space there. Okay. So that's what led me also to get into enterprise and find myself solving more media-related problems for people. So it wasn't really a thing of that art and media were the thing I wanted to do, but I guess I was just that guy that was looking to just solve some problems.
So the thing didn't start after you went to school?
No. The whole, I've just been a creative guy in my record, academic, also in school. I've just always loved just being creative and solving problems in a creative way, that type of thing. So I guess businesses need that there when they're looking at getting into the market, yeah. And also, ideally, the whole idea of business is just getting to solve people's problems, from whether you're in the banking field or mining. Ideally, we're all looking at solving problems in our societies. So for me, I guess that's where I started doing small little things which I hope grow and I find myself influencing bigger spaces. Yeah, that's how I've looked at my growth. I'm still young and still growing,
yeah.
So I've got a lot to learn, I've got a lot to experience as well, but that's my passion is in solving problems.
I understand you currently doing your studies online.
Yes.
Tell me more about it.
Okay, fortunately with being on the internet and browsing a lot, I came across a kind of like an educational institution, which was offering certain courses which I thought might also help me grow in my knowledge and my experience as well. So I checked it out, and being a Zimbo, you're skeptical about some of these things here. The payment methods are going to be crazy, finding access to Forex, it's crazy. But I decided to take it up with me. And I had also seen it via Econet. They always send a lot of messages. So I tried not to be negligent. Sometimes you just look at your inbox, you click a message from them, and they're like, these guys. Yeah. Then one day I clicked on one of them, and it was that institution that was offering a variety of stuff, but I found something which kind of interested me, which was the digital marketing course. So that's what I got myself into, and I'm still on my way to completing that thing. So you get to see also, when you're studying with someone who's from abroad and stuff, you get to see the world also in a different view. You get to see social media from a different perspective. You get to experience it in a different way. And that's what I hope to, after getting all my knowledge from there, those are the spaces I'll be looking at getting into.
So talking about finances in terms of your online studies, how did you find it? Is it expensive or?
The costs, when you look at it as compared to ideally, it's something which I can't find locally in the market. There's no institution here which I can go to and say, and it will be there available. So to start off with, it's something which is not on the market, and meaning our system is a bit behind in terms of catching up with the digital world. We don't have much schools that are offering those kind of things. So that was a plus, because I was doing something which I won't be able to find. On the other hand, the difficulties are always, since it's online, at certain points I have to find myself in a place where I'm connected to the internet and have access, where I can go through a full lecture and a full lesson whilst I'm online without having any troubles, any glitches or stuff. So those are the difficulties, excluding the whole issue. Payment is the biggest issue, even if it's not expensive, but finding a way to get to pay someone who is in Ireland or in the UK is a difficult thing for a young Zimbabwean youth out here. So you can communicate with them, DM and stuff like that. Then they tell you, okay, we accept Visa and Master, and you're thinking, EcoCash, RTGS, and those are real life issues which we are trying to deal with. So you get other banking options which sometimes offer you, but it's risky, but sometimes it's a risk I was willing to take myself. Yeah, so I did it. I do my banking with Stewart Bank. This is not an endorsement. So they offer a non-charge MasterCard, which I can put funds into and then get to make payments online. So that's how I've tried to work it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me about your experience as a freelancer.
Yeah, freelance has been my thing for a while now. After going through South Africa and working a little bit for some people there, I it's more a thing of just I guess learning how to manage your time. Yeah, because sometimes in business, I guess time is the most vital resource we have in business, in life as well. So freelancing is not the easiest of things to do if your self-management is not so on point, because you have to manage your time, you have to manage your work schedule, you have to be a person that's willing to go out there, you have to have decent public relations, because there's no one standing in front getting to talk to clients for you. You have to be able to talk to clients, different kinds of clients, different kinds of people. So for me personally, I guess maybe I'm someone who I try and relate to people a lot. I'm very open-minded generally about how I view people and the world. So it's a fun experience for me, freelancing. It's fun, but I enjoy it very much, to the point where sometimes I forget that it's actually meant to be business. Because sometimes you get to have a relationship with someone and realize that they're working on something which is bigger than just the money that's involved. So those are some of my experiences in freelancing as a designer. Yeah.
Okay, and what makes you unique as a designer?
What makes me unique as a designer? That's a difficult question. There's only one of me in the world, so that makes me unique. I guess my passion, I'm willing to go an extra mile to get someone's, to get to communicate what clients really want, how they want to see themselves out here. So I don't know if that makes me unique, but yeah, I'm willing to really, I'm passionate, highly passionate about seeing people's visions being fully executed, from design, whether personal, from businesses, whether businesses or at work when I'm working with individuals. Yeah.
So you said you did your studies from where?
Locally here. I did an apprenticeship, which was attached with a few lecturers who were at Poly, the art school at Poly. So ideally, it was kind of like in sync with the local polytechnic from here. So it's kind of like going through getting a master, and you're a student, and you have to learn everything your master knows whilst you're getting the work experience as well. So ideally, what I mainly got out of it was a lot of work experience. I didn't do any academic courses. I am self-taught as a designer, and in terms of using the tools we use, which are programs and software, I'm self-taught. I have a personal background in just computer usage. So from that, they already had an idea of how to use the computer, and by the time we were now doing design-related stuff, I guess it was easy for me to grasp the idea. So academically, I haven't actually studied anything to do with design. I only just started studying related with marketing related stuff. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So in terms of design, I'm self-taught. Yeah.
But do you have any plans of taking up those studies?
I've looked into it, and I guess there's when I really get to think about it. For me, I did it to enterprise, which is the business side of things, and making a living out of it. Okay. So ideally, someone who makes a living is someone who can sell. So if you're a designer and you don't sell, ideally you're still not yet making money. But if you're someone who sells and you don't design, you still have a chance of making some money. So I figured I have to teach myself. I have to literally find myself in spaces where I can learn how to sell things. Those are the things I would love to learn about. I'd love to go into business school and stuff like that and learn more about enterprising. The design side of things, I think, comes with your people's passion. That's what really develops you. Sometimes you find people with, what we would say, they're just natural designers, natural artists, creatives like that then. So I'm a creative artist in the sense that I like to create in the design space. So, but I'm not an artist. I know I don't know what really defines. It's a difficult way to actually define someone by their art. But yeah, personally, I like to sell things.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, designs, do you become natural?
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I guess it comes also just like people who write books and stuff like that. Like, do you just come up with it and do a book or something? It takes a lot of doing research, developing an idea, brainstorming and stuff like that. It's not like someone tells me what they want and I sit for like 5 minutes and come up with some stuff. When you see the end product, you might think that this was simple and easy, but there's a lot of thought to it. Yeah, so usually with a lot of thought comes mental health. So I'm part of Tech Village, which is a hub for technical entrepreneurs. So that's the space that I usually use just to keep myself refreshed as well, because I think it comes with a lot of mental strain as well. Yeah, it's not just picking up a pen and a pencil and a paper and sketching some stuff. Yeah, you just have to have peace of mind and a whole lot of other factors. Yeah, so it's difficult, but we do it every day. Yeah. So,
njengomuntu who is into marketing, and maybe can you share with us the best ways of marketing products?
That day you might have to make an appointment with me for me to give you the best ways. But I guess it's about knowing what you want to achieve, knowing yourself and understanding your audience. Mostly it's about really understanding your audience, understanding who you want to reach, who you want to target, and then getting to communicate, because it's just like having a conversation with someone. You have to get to understand each other, and that's what makes the business side of it much more easier as well. But for more in-depth on that, I guess, yeah, an appointment can be made and we can discuss more for those interested in getting to know how they can get to communicate with their audiences.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And what message would you give to your viewers?
Okay. My message would be, I guess, follow your passion. I guess that's what got me here. And even though it gets difficult, but yeah, stick to your passion, stick to what you love. And that's my message.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.